Learn how to create, sustain, and scale up your print-on-demand business with the latest tips, guides, and strategies to help you start selling and making money today. Welcome to the Sales on Demand Show. And here's your host, Adam Schneider.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sales on Demand Show. I'm Adam Schneider, your host. This is episode 31. Hopefully, the sound quality is not that bad. My normal headset that I use for recording broke, and I had a little funeral for it because it's really not coming back. I'll buy a new one, though, off Amazon, because that's what we do. So, episode 31. Today we're going to talk about building a real brand. Part 2, sales taxes. Everyone's favorite topic. Honestly, this is not going to be an in-depth and really complicated episode. Handling sales tax is much easier and possibly much more complicated than you can imagine. But it all depends on how much money you're making as to whether you need it to be complicated or easy. But first, let's talk about your mattress. No, I'm kidding. Can you imagine if I had commercials for mattresses on the show? How terrible would that be? Now, what I will tell you is that sales are picking up. Right now it is August the 10th, and I'm seeing a definite upswing in sales volume, which is good. It's very encouraging to me to see that. I'm doing probably about 7 times more sales volume than I did last year. Of course, most of that's on Amazon, but also some of that is on Etsy. And I haven't paid much attention to Etsy, but I suppose I should probably sit down and just do a little bit of work on that. So, if you haven't already gone and clicked like on the Facebook page, go ahead and do that, because most of the newest and best content that I'm going to be releasing, you're going to see it first on Facebook. And I mean, let's be honest, a lot of us use social media just endlessly, and I use it for all of my business stuff. That's where I see all of my, my mentors are on there, all of my, new information I get from Facebook. It's just a good place to be. So here are some trends to watch for this week. So this is something that I didn't know, and because I'm not a sophisticated person, I didn't know what you use a tumbler for. So I'm aware of a product called a tumbler, and it looks like a coffee cup or coffee mug, but it's stainless steel. And I always thought, oh, is that like a cold drink thing? Yes, apparently it is a cold drink thing, and a lot of people use tumblers for water, which I don't know why you'd use a tumbler for water instead of a water bottle. I just have a water bottle, and I click the little thing to make sure that water comes out, and then I drink, and then I put it back. But apparently people use tumblers for water. I don't know if they're waterproof, but customized tumblers are very, very popular. So I'm going to be producing some customized tumblers because it's still hot out. It is still summer, and you might as well just take advantage of that hot weather and make some tumblers. Also, apparently people are going away from using the single-use water bottles, and people are trying to be more ecologically conscious. So they're getting tumblers, which I'm sure use way more energy to produce because they're made of steel. Anyway, also, back to school. I don't think any parent is unaware of the fact that school starts in 3 weeks, and we're all excited about that, maybe even less, depending on when your kids go back, maybe like the 28th of August or something. But giving a gift to a teacher is a very common thing, and you may want to create a few listings to reflect that back to school thing. So, the summer is almost over. It may only be August 10th, but that's pretty much it, man. So here's some things that I recommend you do this week. Start adding listings to all of your platform like it's your job, because it kind of is your job. Nobody's looking over your shoulder, but if you really want to be successful in print on demand, you got to keep adding listings. So Shoot for 5 a day if you don't work full time, or 10 per week if you do work full time. 10 per week is pretty doable. You can do them all at once, or maybe like 1 or 2 a day. Depending on how disciplined you are, pick one day of the week and just do all of the work that day, or do a little bit every day. If you're really disciplined, you could do that. So last episode, we talked about building a brand versus having a hobby. So I talked through 5 steps that you can use to build a major brand and, get to $1 million in sales. I'll go through them really quickly again here, just so that you'll remember. So step 1 is getting access to all the platforms, opening up an Etsy account, an Amazon account, launching a few designs, and get some sales. Learning what e-commerce is part of this. A lot of people are probably in step 1. You're like, what's a conversion? What's Amazon? Well, if you don't know what Amazon is, you really need to, maybe catch up to the 21st century. But a lot of people don't know that individuals can sell on Amazon. I didn't know that until I started selling. I always thought Amazon was just this big monolithic thing. And here's a funny story. I once wanted to buy a generator on Amazon, and it was a remote start generator. And I tried to buy this generator. So I clicked buy on the listing, and I don't shop a lot on Amazon, so I didn't really know. I was just like, okay, I want this generator sent to me. Whatever it costs, I will pay that money. So I waited and waited and waited, and nothing happened. I didn't get the generator. So I looked, and it turns out that Amazon had refunded the money, and I was like, well, what's going on? So I called Amazon, and I'm like, hey, send me a generator. I don't care where the generator is. Just go and look in the warehouse and find the generator and send it to me. What I didn't know is that Amazon didn't have these generators in their warehouse. It was a fulfilled by merchant listing. So whoever the merchant was, they were, I don't know, they probably had some issues with this, but Amazon ended up giving me a $75 credit. So, hey, that was cool. But I had no idea how the process worked. And looking back at it today, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I know what happened with that. But that was not very long ago. And, I just didn't know what I was dealing with. So you got to expect that customers are going to have the same thing. And when you get started, you're going to be in the same boat. You're not going to know anything about what's going on, and you need to learn all of that. And it does take time. So step 2 is build on that success, send some designs for fulfillment by Amazon, and get some reviews. Reviews, not very important. They're kind of important, but they will come. Everybody always says, oh, when am I going to get my first review? When someone leaves you a review. I don't usually follow up with customers to get reviews. It's just not worth my time. So step 3, once you've developed, a little bit of success, you're maybe making $1,000 a month in sales, something like that. Start thinking about creating a team and building a process to scale up. I always tell people that it's much harder to get to 1,000 sales a day than it is to get from 1,000 to 3 or 4 or 5,000 in sales every month. Sorry, did I say a day? So yeah, okay. Let's restart that. It's easier to scale from 1,000 to 3,000 sales a month than it is to get to that first 1,000. That's a big jump. Getting from 0 to 1,000, that's a big jump. And a lot of people don't even ever make it there. I know there are people right now who've been selling for like 2 or 3 years that still aren't making $1,000 a month. And I know exactly what they're doing wrong. And I've told them, and they don't change. So, okay, maybe they're okay with that $1,000. But I'm here to tell you, you can make more. Once you get to that 1,000, it's much easier to get from 1,000 to 3 or 4 or 5,000. And often the limitations are not your time, but it ends up being like money and, other limitations that are harder to overcome for just regular people. You got to start creating a business rather than just getting a few sales. So that's where I'm at right now, is creating a team, building a process, making a website, creating a corporation, and I'm debating right now trademark protection, which, again, not super important, but it's something that I would like to do. So I'm at the step, I've opened up my corporate bank account. Nothing's happening with the bank account. It's just sitting there. And at some point, I'm going to have to start, depositing money in there and having money coming out. And that's all going to take a lot of time to sort out, and it's really annoying. But once I get it sorted out, I think it'll be good. Step 4, scale up till you get to $1 million in sales. Sounds simple, and it's not. But I tell you that scaling up is a matter of, it's not a matter of effort, it's a matter of repeating the success that you've already had. So if you see something is working, then you repeat that. You don't just do the same things that you were doing when you first started in step 1. Like listing designs and just listing and listing and listing. You're not going to get to $1 million in sales just by making new listings. You got to go back and look at what's selling. You got to send those products for FBA. You got to start, getting bulk products for cheaper. You got to start creating a team that can replenish those products for you. You got to start building listings that are customized listings, stuff like that. So that's how you scale to over $1 million in sales in a year. And step 5, you can sell your business, or you continue, scale up to $2 million, or just keep making $1 million a year in sales. If you're making about 25% profit, well, do the math. You're going to be running $250,000 to $300,000 to $400,000 a year in profits. But you will need a team to do that. That's a little bit more difficult for one person to do that. You generally will have a team, or at least a few people that you can rely on to do things when you can't. All right, so today, we're talking about sales tax. This is a topic that is extraordinarily complex, but yet is not very important for beginners. I see a few beginners, the more savvy ones, who raise this question right off the bat, and they're like, well, what do I do about sales tax? Because we know that sales tax is a thing. Every time you go to the grocery store or you go and buy something from Best Buy or even from Amazon, you see that little number that's below the cost of the product, and you're like, well, I know there's sales tax, that's a thing, and I'm paying it. Now, how do I collect it, and where do I send it? Am I just putting it in a separate bank account, and then once a year, you put all these nickels in a bag and you launch it from this slingshot, in the general direction of the Capitol building? I don't know. It's actually very complex. And I'll tell you why it's complex here. So I'm just going to switch over to my screen here, and I started reading on this because I wanted to make sure I had some background in this. I already know a little bit about sales tax, but because I'm Canadian, sales tax in Canada is actually fairly simple. We have kind of a centralized tax system. The federal government basically collects most of the taxes, and here in Alberta, we do not have a sales tax because Alberta kicks butt. And we are one of the only provinces that don't have a sales tax, and I am very grateful for that because sales tax is annoying. So here in Canada, we have the goods and sales tax, or GST, and it's a federal 5% tax. And when a Canadian makes a sale to another Canadian, you are expected to collect and remit that tax if you have a GST number. So here in Canada, getting a GST number is as simple as applying for one. And there are benefits to getting a GST number. So if you're Canadian and you're selling in Canada, you want to have a Canadian-based business selling to some customers in Canada, you can actually get the GST that you pay returned to you. So I did this when I was farming back, just last year and then the 10 years before that. So when I'd go to the store, if I was buying a tool and I was buying a tool for the business, I'd get charged GST. because GST is charged on everything that's not groceries or, the essentials. You didn't have to pay it on, bread, but you have to pay it on like fast food. So I could take the receipt and I could submit a GST return and say, okay, well, I paid GST on a tool and I want it back. And it was a very easy process. And the government would just send me, a small check, maybe like $60 every 3 months or so. And that was my GST. So I've had a GST number for a long time. And as soon as I started selling online, I was like, well, I guess I have to collect GST now. So collecting GST or collecting sales tax is pretty easy. But you have to go into your settings on Amazon and Etsy and set it up to collect. Now, for Canadians, super duper easy. You just say which provinces that you want to do this in, and then it knows the rates. All of the rates in Canada are like round numbers. It's like 5%, 7%, 8.5%. Now, in the United States, I am looking at a map of sales taxes, and I have no idea. Are you guys insane? What is with this 8.54% here? That's California, by the way. Or 6.95%. That is the dumbest tax rate I've ever seen. I don't know. I just got to shake my head at these not round numbers, because why? Why? Why are you making tax rates that have like 2 decimal places? Don't answer that. I don't even want to know. Anyway, so obviously, since there are 50 states, I think there's still 50 states in the United States, each one has a different tax rate, and some of them don't have tax rates. Then, to complicate things even further, individual cities in some states, like Chicago or Fresno, California, I don't know if Fresno actually has a local tax rate, but Chicago does have a 10.01% tax rate. I'm looking at it right now. And they collect sales tax in Chicago. Now, here's the thing. If you're selling on e-commerce, these states, they want sales tax, right? However, they're not going to come after you, and they're not going to notice you until you start making a lot of money. So compliance with sales tax is actually insanely expensive. And I'm going to read here. So there's a website called taxjar.com, and I just opened an account on TaxJar because I was curious to see what my sales tax might be in the US. But apparently to determine if you owe sales tax in the US, it generally costs you about $4,500 to get what's called a Nexus Study. Now, I'm going to use the word Nexus, and I'm going to explain what Nexus is. Nexus is having a presence in a state that means that you have to pay sales tax, or that they deem that you have to pay sales tax. So Nexus is basically the state saying, yeah, you have a presence in the state, you have to pay sales tax. What is Nexus? Who knows? It changes hourly. Every state has a different definition of it. Every city has a different definition of Nexus. There is absolutely no way for you to know whether you have Nexus in a state unless you look at that state's sales tax. That's why I said this is complicated. Now, for me as a Canadian, it's pretty easy. I don't really have Nexus in any state. However, it has become a little bit easier for even U.S. sellers and Canadian sellers. It's getting easier. So I don't want to scare you with all this talk about Nexus and stuff like this. Basically, if you don't make about $200,000 a year in sales, you don't even have to worry about sales tax, because generally speaking, the minimum filing requirement is usually it's between $100,000 and $500,000 per state, or 100 to 200 individual sales in that state. Now, you might be thinking, well, as soon as I make 100 sales on Amazon, no, it's per state. So let's say you make 10 sales to California. You haven't hit that I think California's 200 sales before they want you to start collecting sales tax. And then Texas, maybe it's, you get another 3 sales there, and maybe you get like 30 sales in New York or something like that. Anyway, it doesn't matter how many sales you get overall as long as your sales in any particular state don't cross that line. Even then, it's unlikely that if you have 101 sales in California, well, no, California's different, but if you have 101 sales in New York, and you don't file a sales tax return, are they going to come after you? I don't know. Probably not. They're looking for these big guys. So how do the states enforce sales tax? Well, it's very difficult for them to do that. And so the answer is that they're going to make Amazon do it. Basically, every state is enacting laws that are going to require Amazon or Etsy or Shopify or any platform that is selling in that state. They're going to make them collect the sales tax and remit it. So it's already happened in 19 different states, and it's spreading. So every once in a while, I get an email from Amazon that says, sales tax is now being collected for customers in Kentucky or Pennsylvania or whatever. And Amazon is collecting it, and Amazon is sending it. You do not even have to think about that. That's fantastic. Now, of course, all of these states are seeing Amazon. Amazon started this, really, because Amazon was the very first, really powerful e-commerce platform. And for a long time, of course, sales tax was always a local thing. When you go to a grocery store in New York, they would charge you sales tax. But if you ordered something online from someone and you lived in New York and it shipped from California, they didn't charge sales tax because it's considered to be local. Now, all of these states are looking at Amazon and how much money it's making, and they're like, I want a piece of that. Of course, governments are, they're greedy. They see money, they want some of it. So naturally, they're going to try and take some of it. And, if you have a big enough company, they might come after you and tell you that you need to pay taxes. However, like I said, unless you're making $200,000 a year in sales, this isn't something that you need to worry about. And even then, I don't think that you really need to get too excited about this, because I think Amazon's all of these states are going to start making Amazon and Etsy just collect and send the tax. And there is some hope. There are some laws that are actually in the pipeline. Let me see if I can find that part again. Where did I see that? I don't know. It was on this. I'm going to put a link to these articles that I'm reading so that you can read them for yourself if you want to. But basically, they're trying to centralize tax collection. They're trying to make it easier for individual sellers, because otherwise, basically, a lot of big companies, they pay $100,000 a year to do these Nexus studies every single year. Can you imagine giving $100,000 to a company just to find out if you have to pay sales tax in some jurisdiction, like New Hampshire or Connecticut or whatever, Vermont? That's a ton of money. That's an insane amount of money. Nobody could afford that. So they're trying to streamline it, and hopefully they get there. But in any case, like I said, if you're not making a ton of money, don't even worry about sales tax. Now, for Canadians, the threshold for getting a GST number is $30,000 in sales. So once you reach that $30,000 in sales, you might go get a GST number. Now, on the other hand, I don't know if the government I've never seen the government actually force anybody to do this. They might, and I don't think it's worth taking the risk if you live in Canada to not get a GST number. But I mean, are they going to come after you? So let's say you make $3,001 in sales and you don't go and get your GST number. Are they going to come and knock on your door and be like, hey, here's the form, fill it out, jerk? No, they're not going to do that. But there are some benefits to having a GST number. And the biggest one is that you get to get back any of the GST that you spent on your business. So let's say you buy a computer, you pay a GST. Well, you can go and apply to get that GST back. And the same goes if you're heating your house and you have a room of your house that is only for business, which is a business expense. And we'll talk about that next episode, business expenses. You can actually get some of the GST that you pay on the fuel to heat your house based on a percentage of the house that you're using for your business. So, I mean, yeah, it's worth it. You can get really down into the weeds with this stuff. I don't really do that myself. I just submit the big purchases, like a computer or my phone bill, for example, the internet bill. So I take probably about half of the internet bill, and I'm like, okay, this half is business, this half is personal. And I submit that. And the government, they do not care. They'll just go with what you say, especially if you're a small seller. They're not going to come and check on you. And that's interesting because, well, the way that government's going, you almost expect them to come and knock on your door and, make sure that you're using exactly the percentage of your house that you say you are for your business instead of 1% less or more. But I've never been audited, so what can I say? It's working for me. So if you didn't want to listen to all that and you're like, well, I still don't know what I should do for sales tax, let me just sum it up for you. Don't worry about it. If you're not making, $100,000 or $200,000 a year in sales, you do not need to worry about this. Especially if you're Canadian, U.S. sales tax is something that is just the furthest thing from my mind right now. I'm aware that sales tax exists. When I buy my products, I know sometimes I'm paying sales tax on buying it, especially when I buy from Custom Happy. There is a way to avoid that if you get a reseller certificate, but that is actually a complicated thing to get, and I might get it, but I might not, because quite honestly, the time it takes to go and get something like that might not even be worth the money. So that's it for today. Hopefully your mind is at ease about this sales tax thing. Like I said, if you're making $1 million a year in sales, then you start having to look at, getting compliant with these sales taxes. And like I was saying when we talked about the steps here, the problems that you're going to face when you first start selling are far different from the problems that you face when you're a big seller. The problems that you face when you start scaling up are things like customer service, responding to customer messages, tax compliance. I don't know. There's just a bunch of different things that new sellers don't even have to think about. The first thing that you need to think about is getting your first few sales. So if you haven't done that, get out there, start creating some designs, get yourself some sales. All right, guys, that's it. Check us out on the internet, salesondemandshow.com, and we'll see you next week.